All right, you're good.
Okay, so for today, we're going to be looking at my
You're good, man.
So for today, we're going to be looking at my research study, Constructing Normalcy, a qualitative study of college students' perceptions of marijuana use and ingestion methods. For our introduction, marijuana use is becoming increasingly normalized on college campuses. It's no longer seen as taboo. Instead, it's often just part of student life. Legalization and broader social exposure have influenced how students think about marijuana, how they use it, and how they judge others who do use it. One key factor that hasn't been fully explored is ingestion method. Whether a student smokes, vapes, or uses edibles can change how others perceive the risk, cleanliness, or social acceptability of their behavior. So these were the research questions that I used in my study, and they are: what factors do college students perceive may lead someone to use marijuana, and do these perceptions differ by method of ingestion? A little bit of the background of why I wanted to ask these questions. I had four reasons, and one is because marijuana isn't just marijuana anymore. The how is just as important as the why. Smoking, vaping, and edibles all carry different moral and social meanings on campus. Reason number two, because college students aren't passive, they're making risk-based, image-based, and emotion-based choices. Whether it's to relieve stress, fit in, or stay discreet, students weigh options based on how a method looks, feels, and affects their reputation. Number three, because policies treat all marijuana use the same, but students don't. University programs assume that marijuana use equals marijuana use, but students distinguish between a vape pen before bed and someone constantly reeking of smoke very harshly. And our last reason, because perception drives behavior. If vaping is seen as harmless, it's used more. If edibles are seen as clean, they're less judged. This shapes real-world usage patterns and risks. Moving on to our literature review, normalization theory explains how marijuana use is now seen as normal, especially on college campuses, which was studied by Geisner and Lee in 2008. It's not viewed as a deviant behavior, but as something routine and socially accepted. Key factors behind use include peer influence, stress relief, and easy access, whether through dispensaries or social circles. This was studied by Blavos et al. In 2017 and Pearson et al. In 2017. More recent research shows that method matters. Students often see vaping and edibles as safer or more discreet than smoking. This was studied by Park et al. In 2023. However, there is a large gap in the literature about what we know about how ingestion method affects how people are judged socially or morally. And that is what this study aims to uncover. Moving on to our methods section, I conducted a qualitative study using semi-structured interviews with 10 undergraduate students at Texas Tech University aged 18 to 22. I used purposive sampling to select participants likely to offer insight into college campus marijuana perceptions. Interviews lasted about 30 minutes. They were held privately and followed a flexible guide of 11 open-ended questions on marijuana attitudes, ingestion methods, and social influences. I used thematic analysis to identify patterns in responses, starting with open coding in order to see the patterns form within the data. And finally, I practiced reflexivity to account for my own role as a peer researcher and to preserve the authenticity of participants' voices. Continuing on my methods section, the following coding table produced by Braun and Clark in 2006. I began right here, as you can see in the first column, with open coding, which involved identifying repeated phrases, language, and ideas in the participants' own words. For example, everyone's doing it, or vaping is more acceptable. Then I grouped these into axial codes, which is the middle column, which captured broader categories like social normalization, coping behaviors, or ingestion-related judgments. Finally, I developed selective codes, which is the last column, and these are the core themes that shaped my findings. And these three core themes were normalization of marijuana use, coping and stress relief, and ingestion method shapes perception. This process allowed me to move from specific student quotes to general insights that answered my research questions. Moving on to the results section, the analysis revealed three major themes from the interviews. And theme number one, as discussed, was social influence. Students described marijuana use as highly visible and normalized within college life, especially in dorms, parties, and peer groups. Quotes like everyone's doing it, and even if you don't use, you're around it constantly, show how marijuana has been embedded into college culture and campus culture. It's no longer seen as rebellious, it's expected. Theme number two was coping and stress relief. Many participants shared that others use marijuana to manage academic pressure, emotional stress, or even purely out of curiosity. Statements like, it helps them when they're stressed out from classes, or I was just curious, reflect how marijuana functions as a self-soothing strategy for some students trying to manage the demands of college life, which also makes it a little bit more individualistic and a more internal theme. Our last theme is ingestion method shapes perception. Students made clear distinctions between methods of use. Vaping and edibles were often described as more acceptable, cleaner, and easier to hide, while smoking was judged more negatively. As one participant said, I judge people more if they smoke, showing that method influences how marijuana users are perceived socially and morally. Together, these themes suggest that marijuana use among students isn't just about access, it's about identity, stress management, and how one chooses to be seen. And moving on to our last slide, the conclusions. The findings in this study show that marijuana use on campus is normalized, but how it's perceived depends heavily on context and method of ingestion. Students often justified others' use as either a response to academic stress or just something that everyone's doing. This supports existing research, but also shows how college culture reinforces use as normal. One of the most important takeaways is that students don't treat all marijuana use the same. The method of ingestion, whether it's vaping, smoking, or edibles, changes how a user is perceived. For example, smoking was seen as more intense or reckless, while edibles and vaping were viewed as discreet or more acceptable. This matters because current education and prevention strategies often ignore these distinctions. They treat all marijuana use as equal, but this study suggests students are making value judgments based upon method, not just frequency. So, if we want to develop realistic policies or effective health messaging, we need to acknowledge how students interpret marijuana use, not just whether they do it. And these are my sources that I utilized for both my research paper and the presentation today. Thank you.